Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cultured Pull List. In today's episode, we are going to be covering the Green Lantern story, Green Lantern Rebirth. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, everybody. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. I'm Mike, and this is Luke, your host. And today we're covering a Green Lantern story, Green Lantern Rebirth. The way our show normally works, for anybody new, we summarize the story we're talking about for the week, then we kind of review it, talk about the pros and cons, and yeah, that's how it goes. So, a little bit of context before we start this story. Hal Jordan had not been a Green Lantern for a while in the comics. At some point, soon after the death of Superman story, he kind of went crazy and started calling himself Parallax and pretty much destroyed the Green Lantern Corps. And then like Kyle Rayner and a few other lanterns like kind of picked up the pieces afterwards, and he ended up this is what he looked like in the comics, as Parallax, and he ended up sacrificing himself by I think like stopping the sun from dying, something along those lines. But basically he died, and the Spectre, he actually became the new host for the Spectre.
Right.
And he was the Spectre for a solid like almost 10 years, I think, in the comics. And that's pretty much where this story picks up. Hal Jordan is the Spectre. The Green Lantern Corps has rebuilt, and John Stewart is a member of the Justice League, but I don't think any other Green Lantern is at this point. And yeah. So this story was written by Jeff Johns. The artist was Ethan Van Sciver. The inkers are Prentice Rollins, Marlo Alquiza, and Mike Gray, and Ethan Van Sciver. The colorist is Moose Bauman, and the letterer is Rob Lay. All right, so our story picks up with Kyle Rayner on a mission to another planet, and he's there to help the populace, but they all kind of gather around him as he lands and start chanting something. And he's not sure what it is, but eventually his ring translates what they're saying. And it turns out they're saying that Parallax is coming. So then we see Hal Jordan. He is the Spectre, but he still comes to Earth occasionally. And he is at a airfield watching an air show because he used to be a pilot, And then before he can finish the show, the Spectre kind of takes over and starts pulling him away, saying, they have work to do, basically. And as he starts to be teleported away by the Spectre, Parallax kind of jumps out and like attacks him. And it seems like this is this weird vision happening in his head, and it soon dies down and he goes back to being normal Spectre. But you do see the image of Parallax still in his eye, reflecting in his eye. So, the next thing we see is a couple of hikers hanging around a restricted area in New Mexico. And suddenly, an alien ship crashes down from the sky, almost hits the hikers, and the hikers look inside the crashed ship and see Kyle Rayner. And he frantically tells them that they have to listen. You have to tell them it has a name, talking about some impurity. Then we cut to John Stewart and Guy Gardner going into I think it's a baseball game. But Guy Gardner at this point is not a Green Lantern. He had kind of gone through a bunch of different stuff, like losing his ring and getting a yellow ring and all this stuff in the past, but eventually he just doesn't have a ring at all. And it turns out he's like half alien, and he goes through some stuff which ends up unlocking some latent alien powers in his genetics. So he basically has these shape-shifting powers now. So they're hanging out at the game, and they see Hal there. Hal meets them there and starts hanging out with them. But before they can really enjoy themselves, some people start coming up to Hal and basically confessing their sins to him because of his Spectre power. He's kind of drawing them to him. And then suddenly, Hal is teleported away.
Mm.
So the next thing we see is Green Lantern, or not Green Lantern, Green Arrow. It's a lot of greens. Green
Right.
Arrow and Mia. I don't remember her last name. In the Arrow show, it's his sister, but in this,
I
she's his
think it's
sidekick Speed.
Mia Darden.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So they are at Oliver Queen's lair, I guess, and then suddenly the villain Black Hand breaks in. Now, Black Hand's like an old Green Lantern villain,
Mm.
and he shows up with this weird device that I guess runs on Green Lantern's ring energy or something. But he runs downstairs, breaks into Oliver's lair, and finds Hal Jordan's old Green Lantern ring, which Hal had entrusted to Oliver. But before Black Hand can steal it, Spectre, aka Hal Jordan, shows up, and I really like this frame because it kind of blends the Spectre and Green Lantern costumes,
Mm.
and it
Yeah.
looks pretty cool. You don't generally see that with Hal as Spectre. He just looks like the Spectre. So I
Hmm.
thought that was kind of cool. But he ends up saying all this crazy stuff like, I mean, he's the spirit of vengeance, but he's basically just kind of condemning him and saying like, "Your heart is black as coal," yada yada. And so he ends up burning away his hand,
Hmm.
and Oliver kind of stands there in shock and eventually draws his bow and says, "Don't move, Hal. What the hell are you doing?" And Hal turns around and says, like, "This shouldn't have happened. This isn't me." And then he just sort of disappears in a green cloud of smoke. Meanwhile, Guy Gardner and John Stewart are at Guy Gardner's bar. He owns a bar.
Mm.
Just kind of sharing a beer, talking about, the Green Lanterns and, like, if Guy misses having a ring and everything. When suddenly Guy just kind of starts transforming out of control, and then suddenly he explodes, destroying his bar. But he's able to launch John out of the bar before he can get hurt and caught in the explosion. And then, meanwhile, up in the air, 15,000 feet above the coast of Northern California, to be exact, these pilots are flying around. Not really sure why they're there. I don't know what they really say, but they see Coast City returned, which Coast City was Hal Jordan's old home. It's basically like, seems like kind of a stand-in for L.A. in the
Yeah.
comics. But it was destroyed by Mongol in the Return of Superman storyline, and that's one of the things that drove the destruction of Coast City. Is one of the things that drove Hal crazy and made him become Parallax.
Hmm.
So seeing the city basically return to its old state is supposed to be kind of shocking.
Right.
Then we cut very briefly to Belle Reve prison. I don't really think this is that important, but it just shows Hector Hammond is active and messing with the guards there, and it seems like he's
Hmm.
up to something. Mentioned something about Kyle Rayner. So then we go to the Watchtower, the Justice League Watchtower, where the Justice League is trying to help Guy Gardner, and his morphology, his physiology is really messed up at this point. Like his rib cage and his organs are like outside his body.
Right.
It seems like he's really not doing well, and nobody's quite sure how to fix him yet. Um, then the Justice League gets hailed by some of the other Justice League members who had checked out the bar explosion site, and saw that Hal Jordan's statue was literally the only thing standing
Hmm.
from the bar explosion. And Aquaman and Flash have already checked out the reappearance of Coast City, and they see that the only building there that really has any sort of like electricity or anything in it is Hal Jordan's old apartment building. No, actually, I think the streets and everything are there, but none of the buildings are there except for Hal's
Right.
old apartment building.
Right.
And then Batman decides to just go on a rant about how much Hal Jordan sucks. No. That's kind of the thing. Like, basically accuses him of like doing all the stuff he did as Parallax, like, and like to intentionally like become like the host for the Spectre. It's all part of some weird master plan or something. I don't
Mm.
know. And then Jon Stewart interrupts him and basically tells him to shut up and gives him a piece of his mind. And there is an interesting part of what he says to Batman. He says something like along the lines of Batman never liked Hal because Hal never bought into what he was selling, aka he was
Mm.
never afraid of him because he's the man without fear, basically.
Right.
Um, so then we see Carol Ferris, Hal Jordan's old love interest, slash coworker, I guess, and she's at her dad. Her dad owned Ferris Air, and trying to think of the word, an airplane company. That's a really dumb way to say it, but I get I
Yeah.
get like an aviation company.
Mm.
Um, but this is an old airfield that was decommissioned and everything's in disrepair. Um, and then we cut to Kyle. He had passed out from the crash, and now he woke up and starts saying stuff again that he has to he has to show them all, talking again about the impurity, and said something about Parallax. And he mentions in this voiceover narration that he's trying everything he can not to use his ring,
Mm.
and we're not sure why yet, but we will. We will. And then we cut back to Carol at the Ferris airfield, and Hal shows up, and he restores the whole airfield so it looks brand new. And he and Carol kind of talk about, just like the way he left and just how messed up everything was. But then they also reminisce about the day they met, when they were kids, actually, and it was actually the day his dad died, because
Mm.
his dad was flying a Ferris airplane when something malfunctioned, and he ended up being caught in the crash.
Right.
So then we go back to the watchtower, and we see that Zatanna has used some spell to locate Hal. And then we cut back to Hal and Carol tells Hal that she's married, but they kind of like reconcile anything and just kind of they share a hug. But then the Justice League shows up and says like, "What the hell are you doing?" And they confront him with the return of Coast City and the destruction of Guy Gardner's bar. And he says he doesn't know anything about it. The only thing that he intentionally did was restore this Ferris airfield.
Mm.
But out of nowhere, John starts freaking out, holding his head, and then he just starts attacking everybody. And then at the same time, Guy Gardner starts freaking out on the watchtower. And suddenly, I guess technically, Hal Jordan's ring in Green Arrow's hand duplicates itself and flies onto Guy Gardner's finger, and there's this sudden flash of light, and then we see Guy Gardner standing there, feeling quite better, and in his old Green Lantern outfit.
Mm.
Then we go back to Kyle, and he kind of comes back into consciousness again, because he keeps kind of fading in and out.
Right.
And the ring keeps saying Parallax is coming, Parallax is coming. And the hikers ask what the heck that means, and Kyle mentions again the impurity, and then they're suddenly attacked by Kilowog, one of like the best Green Lanterns, and
Mhm.
he just starts trying to kill Kyle, and he actually ends up breaking open the ship even further, and inside the ship there's a coffin, and it turns out that it is Hal Jordan's body.
Right.
And we see the Guardian Ganthet was also in the ship, and it seems like he and Kyle were trying to protect Hal's body and bring it back to Earth. We're not sure why yet, but now Kilowog's trying to kill them. And like a battle ensues between Ganthet and Kilowog, but Ganthet's able to overpower Kilowog at least for a moment, and um, but during the battle, some shrapnel from the ship comes at Kyle, and he has to use his ring, even though he's been resisting it. And when he uses his ring, he sees a vision of the other lanterns. He sees Guy um, flying away from the watchtower, and he sees John attacking the Justice League. And he says to himself, like, "Damn it, Jordan, you better be worth this." Um, then speaking of Hal Jordan, we cut to Hal, and he is at he had been teleported away when John attacked to this coast city, this newly restored coast city, and we see Hal go into his old apartment building, and right there in the middle of the living room is his old lantern, or what seems to be his old lantern. And as he picks it up, he sees the face of Parallax reflected in it. And Hal says, who did all this? And the reflection says, "You did, Jordan. We did." Then we cut back to Kilowog. Ganthet is able to finally, well, no, he's not able to overpower him, but he kind of keeps pushing him back, but Kilowog keeps coming. So Ganthet, oh yeah, Ganthet also mentions something that Hal Jordan's body was in the sun still, and he and Kyle had gone into the sun to retrieve it, and apparently residual energy that Parallax had held on to preserved the body. So the body hasn't decomposed at all. But he has Kyle take the body and I guess teleport to the watchtower. But then we cut back to Kyle, or not to Kyle, to Hal, and he's kind of being attacked by Parallax, though it seems like Parallax is a part of him. And he kind of splits into two, and then the Spectre splits out of him as well, and there's like a three-way battle with Spectre and Hal trying to fight Parallax. So then we cut back to Kyle. He's in the watchtower. He sees the aftermath of Guy getting his ring that he used to attack the Justice League and like whoever was left, and kind of left part of the watchtower in shambles. And Kyle sees that Oliver's okay, but everyone else on the watchtower is out of commission. And Kyle, while recharging his ring, explains to Oliver everything he found out, which we saw at the beginning. He found all this out on this planet. That those little alien creatures that mobbed him at the beginning and said Parallax is coming, they actually told him what Parallax is. Now, previously in the comics, it was basically canon that Hal just took the name Parallax as like a like a part of his identity, like a split personality thing almost, when he went crazy. But these creatures explain that Parallax is actually like this ancient entity. It's
Right.
basically the embodiment of fear kind of thing. Like it feeds off of fear, and it powers Sinestro's ring. But yeah, so Kyle explains that, and he explains that the Guardians were able to imprison Parallax like thousands of years ago in the main power battery, which powers all of the Green Lantern rings, and all of the rings are connected to it via, there's like this artificial intelligence that is part of the rings, and it's all connected to the power battery. So because Parallax is in the battery, it basically causes an impurity in all the rings that makes them susceptible to the color yellow,
Right.
which is the color of fear. And that's why in like the old comics, like they were literally like weak to fear. So if you squirted like mustard on them, they would be weakened.
Mhm.
So Kyle explains all that, and he explains that Parallax somehow was able to escape the power battery and attached itself to Hal. Um, I guess because he was like kind of like the strongest Green Lantern, I guess was the
Yeah.
idea, and it's able to kind of slowly whittle away at his sanity by making him afraid of kind of everything to the point where he even started to go gray.
Mhm.
And then the destruction of Coast City was kind of the final straw and made Hal susceptible to Parallax's possession, basically. So Parallax totally took over Hal and forced him to do all the messed up stuff he did back in like the 90s comics where he attacked the Justice League, destroyed the Green Lantern Corps, all that stuff. So he explains all that, and then we cut back to Hal, who he and the Spectre are able to briefly um, par- uh, subdue Parallax, and the Spectre explains that he picked Hal Jordan specifically so because he saw that he knew that he was possessed by Parallax, and he thought that he could destroy Parallax from within Hal if he made
Mhm.
Hal his host. But Parallax is able to break free and ends up um, completely possessing Hal again. So we see that in this panel here. He kind of breaks out of Hal's skin.
Mhm.
Um, then we cut back to the Watchtower with Oliver and Kyle, and they're kind of just talking about what they're gonna do, and Hal's kind of processing what's going on, and like all this time, he thought Hal had gone crazy, but when really none of it was Hal's fault. So
Mhm.
he's just kind of processing all that when suddenly they're attacked by this flurry of yellow arrows, and we see Sinestro has entered the scene.
Okay, so we pick back up at the Watchtower with Sinestro, Green Arrow, and Kyle Renner. Um, they sort of fight, and it's in this fight that we realize that the reason that Parallax was able to um, break out of the central power
Mm,
battery was because Sinestro was there already, and he woke him up because the Guardians of the Universe, sort of the council that leads the Green Lanterns,
mm,
is that they fought Parallax a while ago, like millennia ago, and they were able to put him in a coma, and then they kind of like locked his body away in the battery, and it
mm.
stayed dormant for all that time until Sinestro was also there in the battery, and then Sinestro woke him up.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's what this is, and then it seems like Sinestro is able to get control of John and Guy Gardner, at least temporarily, because
Yeah,
I don't
he's
remember.
been able to do that to everyone with the Green Lantern rings, like because they're all
Okay,
connected to the power battery. Like
yeah,
he
okay,
kind of possessed all of them.
right,
That's why
and
Kilowog attacked Kyle, and why John freaked out and then started attacking the Justice League and everything
yeah.
earlier.
And then the main guardian, I don't remember his name, but he's able to break them out of it, and then the Justice League show up, and we cut back to Kyle and um, Sinestro in the Watchtower. They're fighting, and Green Arrow is just barely able to muster up enough willpower to shoot an arrow at Sinestro, which kind
Hmm.
of distracts him for a minute, but doesn't really do a whole lot of damage. And he
Yeah.
mentions later that he like took all the energy that he had, and he's basically like, um, basically as if he hadn't slept for like a few days at this point.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and he couldn't even remember the full oath.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
So like the fact he was able to even do the arrow is kind of impressive now.
Right. Then we cut back to Earth, where the Justice League and some of the Teen Titans apparently are
Yeah.
fighting Sinestro, and it seems like he's getting the upper hand. I think this I don't really understand the
Or no, it's
correlation.
Parallax. They're fighting
Parallax, that's
Parallax.
right, that's right. I
Yeah.
don't understand the correlation with the Alan Scott Green Lantern and the other Green Lanterns because he's not part of the Green
Yeah.
Lantern Corps, but he still
Yeah.
goes by the
This.
Green Lantern for some reason.
Oh well, yeah, because he was the original,
Yeah.
and like he sculpted the ring out of like a comet or something and used
Mhm.
magic to. Yeah, but like he's kind of like seems like he's weak for half this book, and it's not really sure like it's not really clear why. I
Right.
think. like, or I missed it, but
Because
like
yeah,
he
because
even mentions that, like, I'm not powered by the same energy that the Green Lanterns are, so I don't know why I'm being affected. So, and they never really explain it from what I
right,
remember.
right, yeah. Um. Anyway, so they're fighting, and then Hal is able to break out of Sinestro, similar to how Sinestro broke out of him, because they're all kind of like
Hmm.
possessing the same body, all three of them.
Yeah.
And then the Spectre arrives, and he's able to, and then they kind of, I think actually they all kind of three kind of split off because you have Parallax in his like
Hmm.
true form, the Spectre, and then Hal's there as well. Not yeah,
Yeah, like
Hal's there
Hal's
as well.
spirit, basically.
Right, right. And then the Guardian and Parallax fight for a minute, and then the Guardian kind of uses some energy to kind of guide Hal Jordan's spirit to his body, which is in the still in the coffin
Hmm.
on the Watchtower. I think I'm not sure
Yeah,
exactly where it
yeah,
is. Um, but as he goes, he kind of has a spiritual moment where he talks to the alien who gave him the ring to begin with, and then his dad as
right,
well.
right.
Um, and then while Sinestro's fighting Kyle and Oliver, the ring flies off of Oliver's hand and back on Hal Jordan. And he is back, baby. Um,
Right.
they fight, and then Sinestro like shoots him, and he kind of bounces off of the moon. I'm guessing. I'm not really sure what planet that is.
Yeah, it seems like it's the moon.
Yeah, and then they fight, and there's a lot of monologuing and
Yeah.
talking back and forth, and they're just kind of fighting, and a lot of double panels here. And there's this
Hmm.
flashback too. I'm not sure when exactly, but I think it's the first time they met.
Yeah,
Jordan and Sinestro met
yeah.
because Sinestro's still a Green Lantern. Um, he basically says, "I'm the one who's going to train you to be Green Lantern because I'm the best at Green Lantern that there is." And essentially, uh, um, Sinestro grew jealous of Hal Jordan because he used to be the best, but now Hal was the best, and so then I don't know exactly what he did, but he did something to get kicked out of the Corps, and then I don't know if he discovered the Yellow Lantern Corps, if it was already existing and he joined it, but something he joined the Yellow
Hmm.
Lanterns after being booted from the Green Lanterns. It's basically the whole point.
Yeah, he
Um,
found like a yellow power ring.
okay, so it
Um,
existed beforehand. He didn't like discover it.
he did discover, like, he based because he was like the only Yellow Lantern for a long time.
Okay.
Like, well, he discovered the ring basically, or made the ring. I
Mhm.
don't really remember. And I think like the reason he got kicked out had something to do with him taking over his home world. Like, he felt
Okay.
like he was the rightful ruler, and he took it over with his Green Lantern powers. And they're like,
Mhm.
no, no,
Right, 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 right.
Yeah, if I'm totally wrong, let us know in the
Yeah,
comments, because there's like so much
right.
origin backstory stuff. It gets
Mhm.
confusing.
Yeah, so they keep fighting, and then Kyle shows up, and they're able to defeat Sinestro.
Yeah.
This is technically the first time that they've ever met in person, so they have like a fun
Right.
little interaction, and then they go back to Earth where Parallax has possessed the Guardian,
Mm.
and all of the Green Lanterns are there. All the surviving Green Lanterns are there,
Hmm.
and they're about ready to fight Parallax, but then Batman's like, "No, I don't," because Batman doesn't like Hal Jordan, as we discovered in this book. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, Batman's like prevents him, and then the next issue opens with Hal Jordan just punching Batman in the face, and then they basically get back to fighting Parallax. And yeah, over here it's really interesting. There's this thing where all of the Green Lanterns are fighting, and how like basically compares all of their powers,
Mm.
like because John was a like an architect, so he compares it. He sees like all the little details and intricacies of his constructs, and then he says he compares Guy Gardner to like a leaky faucet where it's just sort of like raw power just kind of spraying
Hmm.
everywhere. And then Kilowatt is the only one that has a sound. His ring is the only one that has a sound to it when he fires. It sounds like a loud cannon.
Mm.
Um, and then I didn't know this, but apparently Kyle was like an artist or something because his
Yeah.
is more creative than the other
He
ones.
was actually a comic book artist, which is kind of
Oh, I didn't know
interesting.
that.
Yeah.
And then there's another panel where they're all fighting together. Yeah, and then just more fighting. I'm not really great at describing action, but you can kind of
Yeah.
just see it all on
I
screen.
mean, it's kind of hard to like,
Right, especially with all this weird
and
cosmic shit going on.
who wants a blow by blow? Like, oh, and then he
Right.
punched him, you know?
Exactly, exactly. It, they're fighting. It seems like Parallax gets the upper hand, but then they
Yeah.
take it back and then they fight and then they administer like not the killing blow, but they're able to defeat him again, unlock him back into the battery,
Yeah.
and they free the Guardian guy. Like Gunther is his name, I think. I don't remember.
Ganthet.
Ganthet, yeah, sounds like gauntlet, but it's with a th.
Right, yeah.
Um, And then earlier, like you mentioned, Guy said he didn't miss the ring, but he actually says he lied. He did miss it. And then
Mhm.
there's this showdown with the Justice League and the Green Lanterns. And Batman still doesn't believe that he's fully back, like you mentioned, because he thinks that this
Mhm.
is just like a like the long game he's playing to kind
Yeah.
of get more power and all that. Um, but yeah, they have an exchange, and then they basically just leave. But they're still kind of iffy of each other. And we finally go. We end up back at Bell Rev with Hector Hammond, and he's just kind of there still talking about the Green Lanterns.
Yeah.
And then Hal is back at the airfield with Carol, who mentioned earlier she was going to sell it, but she's decided not to sell it. She's going to rebuild it, and she offers Hal Jordan to fly the planes, but he says no. And then the story ends with Oliver giving Hal his lantern back, and then yeah, Hal Jordan's back as the Green Lantern.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I'd never read this before. I'm
yeah,
guessing you
I've never.
hadn't either.
No,
I was kind of familiar with it because I knew it was the story where Hal
right.
Jordan came back as Green Lantern. And
Mm,
actually, I wanted to cover Blackest Night, but looking into it, I was like, this kind of takes place like right before Blackest Night. It's kind of
mm,
Blackest Night's almost a direct sequel to this, so I figured we
sure.
cover this. So next week we'll be doing Blackest Night. So
Yeah.
definitely check that out. But yeah, what did you think of this book?
My first takeaway is that I forgot how cool the Spectre was.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the
He's a really
Spectre's yeah,
fascinating
he's really
character.
cool. Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, I think about 2011, DC released an animated short on the Spectre. That was
Oh
really cool. You
yeah.
can probably find it on YouTube. It's really
Yeah.
cool. Anyway, yeah, I really like this book. Wasn't super familiar with the Green Lanterns, but like
Mhm.
Green Lantern is one of those is probably the most characters who have the same mantle. Like there's probably
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of them. So I like I've
Yeah.
I kind of pick up on the different traits of the Green Lantern through reading other stories because they're
Right.
everywhere. But this is
Yeah.
the first like main Green Lantern story I read, and I really liked it.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't collect a whole lot of Green Lantern
Mhm.
books, but every time I read one, I really enjoy just
Right.
how cool they look, like
Mhm.
just like the way the constructs look, just how vibrant the colors are and how like
Yeah.
cool their uniforms look, and even in like in other stories where you see other Lantern Corps
Mm.
other lanterns. It's just, it looks really cool to see all the different colors,
Right.
all that stuff. But yeah, and I always and I feel like they're probably some of the best like cosmic DC
Sure.
stories, which is
Yeah.
fun. But yeah, the only thing I didn't like about this book was I felt like there were some details that were kind of confusing
Mm.
and like hard to follow and like almost didn't have a follow up or something like that Alan Scott thing.
Mm. Right.
And I felt like Batman was like kind of a raging dick for no reason.
Right. Right.
That felt kind of off brand. Like not for him to be a little bit distrustful or something, but he was like kind of petty and annoying the whole story. And
Right.
you're
Right.
like, why does he hate Hal Jordan so much? That kind of came out of
Mm.
nowhere. Um, but other than that, I thought it was cool. I thought it was a really cool way to bring back Hal Jordan
Yeah.
and retcon a lot of stuff, but in a way that felt like it expanded the story and lore.
Hmm.
Like the whole taking that kind of dumb thing where from the old comics where the color yellow was their weakness and
Right.
giving that a pretty interesting reason and even giving a reason for Hal Jordan's gray hair because I think in the
Yeah.
comics it just sort of happened and they didn't really
Right.
explain it like he just like started rocking the Reed Richards look out of nowhere, you
Mm.
know. So I thought all that was cool and I always love seeing all the human Green Lanterns together, which is
Right.
really
Yeah.
fun and I feel like um, I don't know, like I don't know if I go so far as to say is my favorite, but it's kind of a hot take. But I feel like I've always kind of thought Kyle Rayner was probably my favorite
I
Green
think so too.
Lantern
Yeah.
because he's so unique and he's really underrated. That's probably
Hmm.
part of it too. But he's just so unique because he's an artist. The way that he makes the constructs,
Right.
he makes them like an artist. So he has some really creative ideas. I find that really fun. Also,
Hmm.
he's kind of the underdog because when he first started, he was like in his early 20s, but to the rest of the Justice League, he was really young, and they were
Yeah.
like, who's this kid, you know?
Hmm.
And he's even done some really cool things where he's become like the most powerful Green Lantern. Like he became
Yeah.
Ion at one point. He's basically like the embodiment of willpower kind of thing. Like he basically became the power battery as Ion. So
Yeah, and
all
at
that
some
stuff is really
point
interesting.
he was able to get all of the rings, and he was, I think, was
Right.
it the Gold Lantern? Was that what he was called? I don't remember.
I don't remember. Yeah,
But he
but
was able
yeah,
to collect all of them.
I forgot about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of really cool stuff to explore with Kyle,
Hmm.
and really they haven't really done it much at all. Like even in the animated stuff, you know.
Right.
So I'm kind of hoping at some point in this new like James Gunn
Mhm.
DCU, I kind of hope he pops up eventually.
Right. Right.
But oh yeah, also I did really enjoy the art
Yeah.
too. Like it's not like anything super special, but I don't mind that at all. Like I like it when
Mhm.
it just looks like true to life art. I
Right.
guess
Right.
I feel like DC does that probably the best. I think out of
Mm.
most,
Yeah.
like they just do a really good job with it. But yeah, that is Green Lantern Rebirth. We'll be
Yes, it
covering
is.
Blackest Night next week. But let us know in the comments what you thought of this book.
Yeah.
And before we totally wrap things up, we're going to do our weekly cultured picks. So,
Mhm.
what did you have this week, Luke?
This week I picked Nightwing Night Terrors #1, and like you mentioned last week, there's sort of the main event, the main summer DC event is Night Terrors, where
Mm-hmm.
like everyone's sort of in this waking nightmare, and I really like it that it kind of everyone has their own little tie-in stories. They're not like
Yeah,
required reading, but you can kind of see, oh, what's this hero up to, or how are they
right.
experiencing this event and how they tie into it. So I thought that's
Yeah,
a
and
really
they
cool
have a
idea.
ton of them.
Yeah, pretty much like at least every ongoing series. There's some mini series that
Mm-hmm.
don't tie in, like Steel doesn't tie in, but
Right.
every ongoing series it does tie in. I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this one was really cool. Like Nightwing is in Arkham Asylum for killing somebody, and you sort of
Oh,
like it's very psychological and
that sounds cool.
nightmares. Yeah, and it's you don't really find out who he kills until the end, so I'm not going to say it. But it was really
Yeah,
kind of a surprise, like, oh, he killed that person. But yeah, it was
that
really
sounds cool.
really interesting story that I really liked.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying the night terrors.
Hmm.
Just like the concept. I feel like DC does horror really well
Yeah.
when they do horror, and
Hmm.
seeing them do like a horror story in like the main DC like run like
Right.
storyline is pretty cool. Well, speaking of night terrors, mine is Night Terrors #1,
Yeah.
which is they had a prelude. I forget what it's called. It's like Night Terrors, like I don't remember
First
what.
Blood, I think is what it was
Yeah,
called.
First
Yeah.
Blood. This is the first. I think there's going to be like 3 or 4 main Night Terrors issues,
Yeah.
but the main story actually focuses on Boston Brand, aka Deadman,
Hmm.
and he's the one guy who's actively trying to fight this villain in Insomnia,
Hmm.
who is causing everyone to basically live in this crazy nightmare world because he's searching for the Nightmare Stone,
Hmm.
which what's his name,
Dr. Destiny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Doctor Destiny hid he's not sure if he hid it in the dream world or in the real world, the
Hmm.
waking world or whatever. But Dead Man is basically immune to his powers because he's dead, so he can't
Right.
really sleep. So it's kind of interesting seeing this focus on like kind of a lesser
Mhm.
character like Dead Man who doesn't really get the spotlight much.
Right.
Um, but he's kind of fun. And you also learn Insomnia's origins in this,
Mhm.
because like he's calling himself like the god of like nightmares or something, but Deadman discovers he's a little more there's a little more to it than that.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting. I'm curious to
Yeah.
see where it goes next. And yeah, and it's also fun because he ends up possessing Batman's body pretty much through this
Ah.
whole interaction. And there's this one part where he like does like all these acrobatic stuff to escape
Mm.
from him. And he said like if there's anything I can say about Batman, the guy works out. It's probably like the most fit body I've ever possessed, and it's kind
Yeah.
of fun because Deadman was a gymnast and an acrobat
Hmm.
in the circus when he was alive, so he's able to actually do all that cool stuff he was trained to do with Batman's body. So
Yeah.
that's all fun. I
Hmm.
look forward to reading more. Like I
Yeah, for
kind of
sure.
have to
For sure.
like decide which ones I want to collect because there's like 20
Yeah.
of these like offshoot things. But that Nightwing one I definitely want to get.
Hmm.
Yeah, it looks fun. I did read the Superman one too. That was
Okay.
pretty cool. And it seems like at least some of these are going to have multiple issues, like 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think so.
But this is going all through August. So yeah, if you
Yeah.
collect comics, I would definitely suggest at least checking some of these out. It's a
Hmm.
pretty interesting storyline, especially if you're into horror stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah, that is this week's episode.
it
Thank you so
is.
much, everybody, for joining us. If you liked this episode, please like and subscribe and share. And if you'd like to check out the Cultured Nerd on social media, you can scan the QR code on the bottom left. And if you'd like to check out Casual Experts, me and Luke's other brand, you can scan the QR code on the bottom right. If you would like to help support us so we can keep bringing you more great content, you can check us out on patreon.com/theculturednerd. And to support our show specifically, the Cultured Pull List, just look for our show specific tier. Thank you so much to all of our current Patreon supporters: Wesley H., Mitch S., Connor Y., Anna M., Oscar B., Craig L., and Salib K. We have been your hosts, Michael Malillo and Luke S. Our logo and visual assets were designed by Jose Navarro, and our intro was designed by myself. Until next time, everyone.
Peace.